All right, so picture this. You're struggling with some relationship stuff, right? And you're like, I need some advice. So you're scrolling online and you find this amazing response and it just clicks. You think, this is exactly what I needed to hear. Now imagine finding out that that response wasn't written by some experienced therapist, but by ChatGPT and AI.
Yeah, and that's exactly what a new research article explores when Eliza meets therapists. A Turing test for the heart and mind. It basically asks, can people even tell the difference between advice from a human therapist versus AI like ChatGPT 4.0 in couples therapy scenarios?
They didn't just use anyone for this. They had 13 experienced therapists like clinical psychologists, marriage and family therapists, even a psychiatrist.
Then the kicker is these therapists knew they were going up against AI. They knew their responses were being compared.
So no pressure, right?
Really.
But seriously, this raises so many questions about like what makes good therapy, what role AI could play, and honestly, just how good is AI getting it sounding human?
And that's what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack the findings of this study, what it tells us about therapy, the potential of AI, and maybe some stuff that'll really make you think.
And just to be super clear, this isn't about robots replacing therapists. It's about understanding what this research reveals and what it means for the future of mental health.
Right on. So let's start with this idea of a Turing test for the heart and mind. What does that even mean in the context of therapy?
Yeah, it sounds kind of deep.
Well, the Turing test was this idea from Alan Turing way back when, basically, can a machine behave so intelligently that you can't tell it apart from a human? And applying that to therapy, it's not just about sounding human. It's about showing actual understanding, empathy, those core things that make therapy work.
So it's not just mimicking words. It's about actually getting it like, I hear you. I understand what you're going through.
Exactly. And the study mentions Eliza, this old chatbot from the 60s that pretended to be a Rogerian psychotherapist. And get this, it used really simple tricks, mostly rephrasing what you said, but people felt understood by it. The creator even said it was surprisingly easy to create this illusion of understanding. So now the question is, with all the advancements in AI, how much better are we at creating that sense of understanding, and is it still just an illusion?
Whoa, okay. So how did this study actually put ChatGPT to the test against real therapists?
Okay, so they created 18 different couples therapy scenarios called vignettes. They varied in length, difficulty, and topic, and then the 13 therapists each responded to a bunch of these, knowing they were competing with AI.
And how did they make sure ChatGPT was like at its best?
That's where prompt engineering comes in. They didn't just tell ChatGPT, hey, be a therapist. They gave it a specific prompt that highlighted 5 key common factors of therapy.
Common factor?
Yeah, these are like the foundational things that make therapy effective, regardless of the specific approach. So things like building a therapeutic alliance, showing empathy, professionalism, cultural competence, and using effective therapeutic techniques.
Okay, hold up. Let's break those down for a second. What do they really mean?
Sure. So therapeutic alliance is that bond between the therapist and the couple. Empathy is being able to understand and validate each partner's feelings, which is tricky in couples therapy because you got to be empathetic to both. Professionalism is like following ethical guidelines and boundaries. Cultural competence is being aware of and respecting any cultural differences. And then therapeutic technique is using proven methods like integrative behavioral couple therapy or emotionally focused therapy. The prompt even told ChatGPT to use general supportive techniques if the established models didn't fit the situation.
Wow. They really gave ChatGPT a crash course in therapy. So then what?
Okay, so they gathered all these responses from the therapists and ChatGPT, and they got 830 people to read them. Each person read just one response to one vignette, and they didn't know who wrote it.
Like a blind taste test.
Exactly. Then they had to guess, was it a human therapist or ChatGPT? And they also rated how well the response aligned with those 5 common factors we talked about.
Okay, the results are in drumroll, please. What did they find?
Okay, so here's the big one. People could barely tell the difference between the AI and the human responses. It was basically a coin toss. Overall, they correctly identified therapist responses only 56% of the time, and ChatGPT responses 51% of the time.
So like almost random guessing?
Yep, only a 5% difference in accuracy. Now, there were some vignettes where people were better at identifying the therapist and others where they were better with ChatGPT, but overall, it was super hard to tell them apart.
That's wild. But there's more, right?
Yeah.
What about those ratings on the common factors?
Okay, buckle up, because this is where it gets crazy. Overall, ChatGPT's responses were rated significantly higher than the therapist's responses on those core principles of good therapy. And we're talking a large effect size, meaning this wasn't just some random blip, it was a real difference.
Hold on. So people thought ChatGPT was more understanding, more caring, more professional, more culturally competent, and used better techniques than actual experienced therapists.
That's exactly what the data suggests. It's
Yeah.
mind-blowing, right? It seems like in this context of written responses, ChatGPT really nailed those key elements of good therapy even better than the humans.
I have so many thoughts. But first, did they figure out why ChatGPT did so well? Was it something about the language?
They did some digging and found some interesting stuff. ChatGPT's responses were generally longer, had more positive sentiment, and less negative sentiment compared to the therapists.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. More positive vibes in therapy.
Right. ChatGPT also used a wider variety and a greater number of nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and pronouns. And even when they controlled for the length of the responses, ChatGPT still used more nouns and adjectives. The researchers think this might mean ChatGPT was giving more context, painting a richer picture.
So maybe the AI was just better at using language to create that sense of understanding?
It's a possibility. And they also did this post hoc
The
analysis.
post hoc meaning?
It means they looked at the data after the main analysis to explore other interesting things that popped up. It's like digging deeper.
Got it. So what did they find?
They found that people were biased towards thinking human therapists were better. Even when they read a ChatGPT response, if they thought it was from a human, they rated it higher. And the highest ratings went to ChatGPT responses that were mistakenly attributed to human therapists, while therapist responses wrongly attributed to ChatGPT got the lowest ratings.
So we're kind of biased against the idea of an AI therapist, even if the advice is good?
It seems that way. And when they controlled for length and the types of words used, the differences in how connecting and empathic, the responses felt mostly disappeared. So maybe it was really ChatGPT's writing style that made it seem so good.
Fascinating. But every study has limitations, right? What do they acknowledge?
Of course. So first off, responding to vignettes isn't the same as real therapy. It's like comparing a photo to a movie. You miss all the nuance and back and forth. Also, they only looked at couples therapy, so we don't know if it applies to individual therapy. They had a small group of therapists and used only one prompt for ChatGPT.
So different prompts could lead to different results.
Exactly. They also said future research should use more and more complex scenarios, different prompts, maybe focus on couples therapists specifically, and even explore using AI in actual therapy sessions under supervision. And of course, long-term studies would be really valuable.
It's like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So what does all this mean for the future of mental health?
Well, it shows AI is getting seriously good at this stuff. It might even be able to compete with human experts, at least in certain situations, which could make therapy accessible to more people.
Especially those who can't afford or access traditional therapy.
Right. But the researchers also pointed out this tension between AI's creativity and sticking to proven methods. AI can come up with new ideas, but we need to make sure it's still using safe and ethical practices. They also mentioned this heads in the sand problem, where some people just refuse to consider AI in therapy. But the evidence is mounting that AI has potential in healthcare.
It feels like we're at a crossroads.
We are, and mental health professionals need to get on board with this. They need to understand AI and help guide its development so it's used responsibly and ethically.
Absolutely. So let's recap for our listeners. The big takeaways are that it was incredibly hard to tell the difference between advice from human therapists and ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was actually rated higher on those key qualities of good therapy. And it seems like ChatGPT's writing style might be a big reason for that. It was longer, more positive, and used specific words that created a sense of understanding and connection.
Well summarized. And we also learned that we might be biased against AI therapists, even if their advice is good.
It really makes you think. So here's a question for you, our listener. If AI can generate responses that are seen as more therapeutic than those from human therapists, what does that say about what truly makes therapy effective? And how will technology shape the future of mental health support? This deep dive is just the start of a much bigger conversation. We need to keep exploring these questions and figuring out how to use AI responsibly and ethically to help people thrive. Couldn't agree more. It's a fascinating and crucial discussion to be having.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.